Yate Bina. Good morning, my relatives. This is Mark Charles, and today is Monday, October 31st, and I'm sitting down with my second cup of coffee. I am very excited this morning because I get to have a conversation with two incredible Indigenous women. One who has been a friend for a long time, and another who I have just had the privilege of meeting recently. But I will be having a conversation with Renee Begay and Mariah Humphries, and they both are contributors to this book, Voices of Lament. And I want to talk about this book. I want to talk about their voices and the laments that they included within that book. And I want to do everything I can to promote their voice and promote this book and have a conversation about that. But before we begin, I want to do as I always do, which is acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from what's now known as Washington, D.C. And these are the traditional lands of the Piscataway. And I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the lands where I'm living. I want to thank them for their stewardship of these lands. And I want to just state how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. And I want to let people know, I'll put this into the comment section, but if you, after this second cup of coffee, both Mariah and Renee are going to join me on my Patreon site to talk about, or to have a Q&A. And so if you are interested in joining that Q&A and you're not a member of my Patreon, you can subscribe to it, and you need to subscribe to the Ask Questions tier. But I'm going to put that into the comment section right now. And I'll share it again at the end. I see Shantina's on with us. Good morning, Shantina. I see Eugene is there, and others who are joining. So let me bring both Mariah and Renee on now, and we will start this conversation. So my sisters, good morning, Bina.
It's Jay.
It's good to have both of you here. I'd like to give you both just an opportunity to introduce yourself. So Mariah, why don't you go ahead and go first, and then Renee can introduce herself after you.
Yeah, it's Jay. Mariah Jehojev Kudos. I am Mariah, and I am a citizen of the Muskogee Nation. And before I say anything today, I just want to acknowledge that I'm on the ancestral lands of the Tonkawa, Tawakoni, the Hueka, who are part of the Wichita affiliated, and also the Comanche and the Lipan Apache. So I'm excited to be here today. I get to talk to a friend of mine, a new friend of mine, and yeah, I'm thrilled. So thanks for having me.
Great to have you, Mariah. Thank you for that introduction. Renee, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. Keshi Kodona Dawake Ho Renee Begay Lashina Home Ho Ano de Golo Dakudan Kakeli Awan Chatle. Good morning. My name is Renee Begay. I'm from the Pueblo of Zuni. I live here in Tiwa Territory, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it's good to be with you guys this morning.
Well, thank you both for joining me. And I just want to talk about how thrilled I am that you are both contributing authors to this book, Voices of Lament. For those of you who have not heard, I mentioned this book about a month ago over a second cup of coffee. I began seeing among a lot of my friends and some of my peers, women who I knew who were sharing that this book had just come out, and I was very intrigued by it because to hear women of color sharing lament in a shared space felt really powerful to me. But I was noticing that none of my native friends were talking about the book yet, and so I spent like an hour trying to figure out were there any native voices included, and I couldn't find a list anywhere. I saw people saying, "Hey, I'm a part of this book. I contributed to this," but I couldn't find anyone who was native saying I wrote this, and I couldn't find a list of all 29 of the contributors. And so I forget what I actually did, if I had to buy it or maybe I found a list online, but I finally found the list. I was going through it, and I saw Ruth's name, I saw Mariah's name, and I saw Renee's name. Okay, good. I'm glad that there's some native representation in this book. And I will admit, and Renee and I have talked about this, we've reconciled a little bit. I was a little bummed that she didn't tell me that she had contributed to this book. But she did let me know that she had submitted my name to receive an advance copy, which I never received. So I don't know what happened with that. But I was thrilled to purchase a copy of the book and to read, especially your contributions to it. and I thought this would be a fantastic way to have a promotion for this book, is to have you on and talking about it. And so I would love just to hear some of your thinking and why you accepted the invitation to be involved in this project, and then we can talk about both of your contributions to this project. And so, Mariah, why don't you go ahead and start and just tell us how you received the invitation, what your thought processes were, and then we can talk a little about you have two contributions in this book. You have
Okay.
a liturgy that you share, I believe, and then
Yes.
you also have a poem that you
Mhm.
co-authored as well.
Yeah, and I'm neither a liturgist or a poet, so let's just make that clear. This might be my first and my last in that space. But yeah, I think it was early fall of 2020. We know what that year was like, and the heat that we were all in this space that is called the US. And I was reached out by Natasha Sistrunk Robinson and said, I would like for you to join this project, and this is what it is. And I was like, write about lament as an Indigenous Christian woman? Absolutely, because we don't do that very often. And so I really was excited about the opportunity to be able to work my way through lament, faith based, to talk about my faith in that way. And within, that scope of 2020, little did I know as I wrote this that I would be losing two family members to COVID at the time. And so
Mhm.
that was an additional um, layer that I was not anticipating having to navigate as I talked about lament in this way. And so
Mm.
it became a very layered and very deep process for me. But I'm really grateful for it. I'm glad that I was able to have the opportunity. But I did not know Natasha when she reached out. I think I knew of her. I think I'd been following her for some time, but we had never met or crossed paths. And so she said, I need to have Indigenous representation in this book. It is a must for me. I need to have, at least 3 to 4. And I was like, fantastic. I will be one of them. Just because I'm in a time of my life where I want to be able to say yes more than no in some of these arenas, because I know that there is not as much representation for us as Indigenous women
Mm.
specifically, and those of us who are, identify as Christian, that it becomes even smaller of a space. And so I wanted to be able to make sure that to be able to share my story and our story collectively, but also just to be able to know that there was not a lot of representation around, at least at that time. And so I wanted to make sure that it was in there. I thought that was also important. And I was very glad that that was a priority for her. So, yeah, super grateful. Said yes, did not know what I was going to be stepping into. And here we are 2 years later. And I've met some amazing, amazing women that I now call dear friends. And people that I support whenever I can. So it was individual, but it was also a collective piece to be able to find new women that I could relate to and who just understand, and I don't have to describe anything and translate anything. It's just being able to walk through life together. So it was really great.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that, Mariah. I want to talk a bit about your piece in the book, but you, even in what you wrote and contributed to the book, you talked about the need and the power of being seen or of
Mhm.
not being invisible, and that was the theme that you returned to repeatedly
Yeah.
throughout your liturgy. And so I want to come back to that in a few minutes, but I want to give Renee a chance to talk about how she got involved with this project. And while you're talking, I'm going to share a link to Natasha Robinson's website,
Yep.
where she has a definite our description of the book and other promotional material for the book, and as well as a list of all the other contributors and everything else. And so I just put that into the chat section there. But Renee, if you would let us know, how did you get involved in this project?
I didn't know Natasha either. And there were, I think, two women that were reaching out to me to let me know that she was trying to get a hold of me. I think it was Sandra Van Opstel and then Judy Douglas, who is part of the organization that I work for, and through them, I was able to get back in touch with Natasha, and kind of hear her heart for the project of what she was wanting to do. And then she was telling me that she was working hard to try to get, Native voices in the book. And so at first I was hesitant and suspicious because I had been studying and learning more about what lament was. And the definitions that I was reading into, especially by Walter Brueggemann, was really like a risky take on lament, that you just show all of yourself to creator, and it's almost like this radical type of relationship that you have confidence in. And so by that definition or that imagery, I was just like, would readers really want to hear about what our heart's desire is, or the cry of our heart is? And so I like in that description how she said heartache, because I felt like when I did have that kind of encouragement to write what was in my heart, I just kind of went with it. And I felt like it was a risky prayer. It was more so me allowing myself to just talk to creator versus like worrying about what readers would think. And so I don't know, I hope people are I don't know, not so much encouraged, but just like can reflect on and relate to the words that I shared on there.
Yeah, well, thank you, Renee. And I want to come back to your contribution as well. I remember I read your contribution first, and as I read through it, I I felt like you were speaking for our Native community. I mean, I could just feel like you were saying things that were on my heart, and you were phrasing them in a way that was um, very inclusive of what the thoughts and feelings were in my own soul. And I remember just feeling this almost sense of relief as I read through what you were sharing in there. Maybe because we both have the experience of growing up in the Southwest, and you described some of your growing up years there. But yeah, so I want to come back to that.
Yeah.
I want to talk for a moment with Mariah, though, because Mariah, you said you're not a liturgist, and yet you included a liturgy. Was that your choice, or did they like
Let's just say
how
no,
did the
it wasn't.
invitation come? Did they say this is what we want you to do, or did they say give us whatever form of lament that you want to bring into this dialogue? What was the invitation, and how did you end up writing a liturgy?
I wrote a liturgy because our friend here, Renee, would not come in and write a poem or liturgy. We're just going to be real here today on my second cup of coffee. No, one of the things that Natasha really wanted to do, that I think is great, was at the beginning of each strophe. She really wanted to have a poem, a liturgy, some sort of poetic wording like that, whatever they do. So she really wanted to have that at the beginning of each. And so there was me and Renee. At the time, early on, there was a First Nations woman from Canada who had to step back due to some personal things that she was facing. And so we originally, and then we had Ruth Ann Buffalo, who's the other author in here. And so we all went and grabbed our text, which was what we were encouraged to do. And then Natasha came back and said, there's nobody from our Indigenous representation that has stepped in and to do a poem or a liturgy. And we all said that is correct because because we were like, and we prefer not to, because what our ask was to be able to share a personal, history, a historical person, which we kind of all struggled with as well, because we are a very collective group and not an individual, which is probably also why it was really hard for us to promote this book too. Because I'm like, I feel weird promoting. I'd rather promote, Renee and Ruth than say that I'm in this book. But so we had to, we also be able to break down the text, which is what I was really excited about. Having a theological degree, I wanted to be able to break down the text. And so she said, we have to have somebody step in. It's like, okay, I will I'll go ahead and take that on. And so we kind of all started a text group, and we were like, who wants to do this? And everyone said, not it. So I went ahead and decided to put my name on there. And yeah, so that's how I stepped into doing it. I was like, I'm not a poet. I don't want to disrespect the art of poetry. So I did a liturgy instead. And so I did
Yeah.
my due diligence on the background of that, of reaching out. I am not of a faith background that does a lot of liturgies. And so I reached out to a good friend of mine who does do them and writes her own. And so she's a leader in a space where she does them often. So I asked for her process. And then after I was done, I sent it off to a good friend of mine who is a psalm scholar. And so I asked him to take a look at that and see if I stayed true to both liturgy and to the text. And I really tried to work through, because I had a larger section of text to work with. I think I had 5 or 6 verses that I had to work with. So I wanted to make sure that I was staying true to that. So that's how I came to write a liturgy. And I still stand by that. I'm not a liturgist nor a poet, even though I did have part of the final poem
Yeah.
that's the back end. I learned a lot from the women who stepped into that space, and that's their craft. They do very well with that, and they are known for that. And so I learned quite a bit from them. But yeah, the liturgy was more, I wanted to be able to have a little bit more of a conversation with just creator as I was going through all of this, and what would I say? What do I feel like I need to say? So that's how I came to be part of the liturgy part.
Yeah.
I wish it was a better story, but it really was out of default, kind of stepping in and saying, okay, I'll take this on for the team. So
Well, let me ask you, I appreciate you sharing that, Mariah, because I think we all have done several things in our lives
Mhm.
where we stepped into a space that we weren't fully comfortable in, and maybe
Right.
it was a helpful thing. Sometimes it may have hindered some things.
Yeah.
So I definitely understand that, and I appreciate what you did. I'm curious, did you feel like you were able to express yourself honestly through the liturgy? And is there anything that of your lament that you still hold in your heart that you may not have been able to express because of the format of the liturgy?
Mm.
Like, is there something that you feel like you weren't able to say or you weren't able to express because of the confinement of the format you were asked to put it into?
I think probably the one thing that I wasn't able to do was what some of the other chapter authors were able to do, which was specifically talk about an individual with, they have a name,
Mhm.
they have a face, and mine was not as much um, that as trying to walk people through why, as an Indigenous woman, I'm even facing lament, why I'm even going through lament, why that's a priority for me. And so, kind of giving a historical walkthrough of some things that have happened to us collectively. And then
Yeah,
woven in there are things that have happened specifically to, the Muskogee, the southeast region of natives, and just with removal, and then trying to actually just tie in some of the other, as I learned about Renee's um, lineage and history, and Ruth Ann. um, it helped as I wrote this, because I was like, I really want this to be kind of a collective, as well as trying to get some of those individuals in there. So I worked my individuality into the title, which was Este Muskogoki Paksangi Mochineta Paksi, which is Muskogee people yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And so I wanted that title to really be specific to who I am. I also have my passages um, typed out in my liturgy. And so I also made sure that I had Muskogee typed above that. And so those were kind of some of the nods to my individual through that. And so that was kind of a priority for me. I think is a priority for all of us. We even talked about that,
Mhm.
how a priority for all of us is talking about land
Mhm.
and talking about connection to creator, and how we're going to be able to do that through these verses that we had. And so that was really the way that I kind of woven in, and probably it may not be caught by a lot of people. And I had to accept that because I really wanted to give a whole bunch of, instead of going through translation exhaustion, I really did want to kind of go through translation all the way through it. They're like, this is why we're talking about this because of this. And I just had to kind of trust that people, as they read this, I mean, I wrote this over 2 years ago. So a lot of things have happened since then, but I'm glad that I was able to mention something like references to MMIW, boarding schools, removal. And I think those things are probably a little bit more aware with people today than they would have if this would have been released even, a year ago. So those are some of the things that, I just wanted to really make sure that that was kind of how my story was woven in there. And then of faith and just how I connect with, Jesus Christ. And it's not about who society says Jesus is, it's about who I know him to be. And so that was really important as well. And so that's woven throughout. So I think it was trying to find that balance of lament and also how that really plays itself out with my faith.
I think you expressed what was in your section very well. Thank you for sharing that, Mariah. I remember as I read through your section, I was struck by how you connected with a lot of these points within our people's history: the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, the boarding schools, and the ways that we're just not seen. Right, we're just our. And you came back to that numerous times. And I love even at the end of your section. This is section 17. The last page is this picture, and then it says, "With Yahweh, I am not invisible, I am not missing, and I am not forsaken." And so, I really appreciated your section there and the voice that it gave to not only of what the history has been and even the reality is, but what the spiritual reality is, right? Which is we're not these things. And so, I appreciated your voice, and I thought it came through very strong in that. So, thank you.
I think as a people, we are very much invisible to society as a people, but as a culture, especially this time of year, hyper visible, with appropriation. And especially, I think what was beautiful about this whole book was it was, for those who identify as female. And so I was able to write this also with in mind who a Native woman would be. And so when that art came back, I got a preview of it and I was like, yes. She said, is there anything missing? I said, jewelry. So these three women have no earrings on, and they don't have any necklaces on, which is very not like Indigenous women. So I made sure that I said, hey, here's some different people to follow. Go look at their ears, go look at their neck, and see what they're wearing. And so even something like that small, I was like, I really want to make sure that representation was even in like what we would wear on our bodies and how we represent even through visuals, like jewelry, which I think was just really important. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. I want to highlight one of the comments there. Michael said, "I'm reading Voices of Lament right now, and it's beautifully written." So I'm glad to see even some of our audience is engaging with this book and reading it. If people want to buy it, obviously you can buy a book anywhere you want on Amazon or anywhere else. I just shared the link to the publisher's webpage where you can buy both an e-copy of the book as well as a hardcover copy. But yeah, those are both there for you to find. You can search anywhere else online and buy it anywhere books are sold. But Renee, what about you? First of all, were you given a format, or were you able to be a bit more have a choice of how you want to share your lament? And then if you would just go again, I said earlier, I connected very deeply with your lament. I felt like there are many ways that you were speaking for me and for our people, and I maybe it's because I know you so well, but I really appreciated your voice in that. So if you could just expand a bit. And your section is towards the end. I think your section 27, if I remember correctly, or 28 maybe.
Yeah. Towards the end.
Towards the end of the book. Yeah. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about your section.
Yeah. So Natasha's overall vision was to write a lament, but then also feature an individual in history that you could write about. And like Mariah said, all four of us originally, Native women, we were just kind of hesitant with that because we didn't feel right highlighting just one person. And then so we kind of just talked with her and said, hey, this is like culturally, this is countercultural for us. Is it okay if we like talk about our people? And of course she was like flexible and said, like, you know, you guys do whatever you need to make this work, and just was encouraging of kind of the adaptation we were making. And so with that, I felt like there was freedom to write my lament and then also feature the values of the Zuni people. Um, and the freedom to write my lament came with the relationship, because at first I was hesitant, but being put in the virtual room of all these other women, we actually met every other week for those past 2 years. I mean, not everyone like came every other week, but like for the most part, Natasha kept that relationship going of not just like we're just writing a book, but it's actually we're coming into relationship with one another. We're listening to each other's stories, and then we're gonna pray with each other. We're gonna read Psalm 37 every meeting. So it was pretty cool to just like have this relationship kind of forming. And so I think through that, you know, like just having that trust grow, I was also encouraged to write that lament. And then writing about the values of the Zuni people, you know, the theme was, you know, who is good. And I just thought of, as I'm learning more, Native peoples have been told that they're not good for over hundreds of years, and it hasn't worked, you know? So like, if it hasn't worked, then, you know, why do we keep doing that? And so for me, the struggle came with like, how do I find, or I guess like within my faith journey, how do I continue to see the goodness in myself? Because if things around me are telling me that I'm either like syncretistic, or my beliefs or my theology or my ways of thinking about creator is like wrong, or like there's like a boundary and I keep stepping outside of it, there was just this frustration of like, well, what does creator think about me? And like what am I, you know, where's that goodness? And so I thought about values, that every community lives by a certain set of values. And of course there is, you know, mistakes that happen within communities, but for the most part, what are those values that people live out of? Can we highlight those values? And when there are mistakes that happen, or things that trip us up as a community, there's the offering of redemption or renewal, things like that. And so I think, yeah, that was just what was going through my mind as I was writing it, and then just allowing my heart to just grieve that space.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for that contribution, Renee. I loved your description of watching the sun and the experience of that. As you know, that's something very dear to my heart. But how that played into your upbringing. So yeah, I deeply appreciate both of your voices, and of course, Ruth Ann Buffalo also contributed to this book. We wanted to have her on this second cup of coffee as well, but she's very busy running for office right now, and so we want to send our prayers and our blessings her way as she continues to work to increase the voice for her people, and to work within this nation to bring about the change that's so necessary. So it was not intentional that Ruth Ann was not able to be here, but just because of her very busy schedule, we were not able to get in touch with her for this episode. But maybe if you could share, it sounds like the three of you, or was it the four of you, the three of you and Natasha, or was it the four of you who were kind of collaborating very closely on all of this?
would say it was the three of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we worked. Yeah, we worked very closely together, I guess, and we tried to stay in contact with each other, kind of kept each other accountable and helped each other out. And yeah, I'm super grateful for just be able to connect with these women, mainly because they're not from, me and Renee being, New Mexico ladies, it helped. But, just getting to know Ruth, who I had been following for quite some time, just had crossed her paths at some point. It was just really great to get to know her and about her people, about their story of removal, how that impacted them. And those are things that, if there's anything that I've learned in this process, is I am still a student, even of our own Native nations. And just when I think I've got a good handle on some things, someone comes along and reminds me that I'm still learning from every one of us. And I think that was one of the best parts for me was, as we kept in contact with each other, even wording. I mean, I even went back and forth with that last poem that I added some lines to, working with Renee and saying, "Hey, I'm struggling with this word. What are your thoughts on this word? And is it, what does it mean to you? This is what it means to me." And so just even being able to bounce some of those things off of people who know. And that was just really comforting and encouraging through this whole process. But yeah, we kind of had a little text chat going back and forth, jumped on some Zoom calls late at
Yeah.
night, worked around even Ruth's schedule, the chaos of her schedule. And yeah, just being able to stay connected. I thought that was really important.
Yeah. How was that process for you, Renee? How did you enjoy the virtual community that you were able to build with Mariah and Ruth as well?
It was good. I mean, given the whole what we were in a pandemic, like we had to we had to meet with each other. So it was good just to have those connections during a time when it was scary and we didn't know, we didn't know very much at that time. And
Yeah.
so just to have that community was really helpful. And it was a very sweet time for me too.
Yeah. Well, I'm bummed that Ruth was not able to join us for this
Mhm.
episode today. I would love to share a cup of coffee with her as well. But I'm so grateful, Mariah and Renee, that both of you could jump on this live stream with me today and talk about your contribution to the book. I want to just voice to you, both of you, my gratitude. I think voices of Indigenous women are so incredibly important,
Mm.
and your contribution to things like this are invaluable. And so to read your laments, to be led into lament by the two of you, along with this other chorus of 20, 27 other women, is a powerful thing. And I can tell you, you may feel uncomfortable promoting your book. I'm going to promote the crap out of it because
Thank you.
it's one of the books that I actually carry it with me now when I travel. And it's one of the books I talk about because when I talk about unsettling truths, right? And when I talk about the role of the church, I say that if the church wants to be a part of the healing of what it's caused, the road to that healing is through lament. And what a better way for a nation that has been built on a doctrine of discovery that deals with racism, white supremacy, and sexism and patriarchy to be led into lament by 29 women of color.
Mm.
And so I'm thrilled to know both of you. I'm again, I'm going to promote this book, the crap out of it. And yeah, thank you for who you are. Thank you for your thoughtful and your wisdom that you share. It's an honor to know both of you, and I definitely want to make sure that we continue this dialogue
Yeah.
even beyond this book as we
Mhm.
continue to press forward in the work. I know you said, Mariah, right? It's October, November when Native issues are kind of between Columbus Day, our Indigenous Peoples Day, and Thanksgiving is right when we probably make, I know I make over half of my speaking income during those 2 months. You know, and so I would imagine that's true for most of us. But yeah, any last things you want to say before we end this call? I know right after this call, we're going to jump over to my Patreon site and we're going to have a more in-depth Q&A. And you can ask questions directly of Mariah and Renee. And so we'll go there right after this. I actually, well, if one of you have anything you want to add, I want to make sure that we're not missing anyone of people who are saying some stuff here. So Lenora is
Lenore.
saying, hey,
Shout out
hey,
to our friend
Renee,
Lenora.
Mariah, great job. We have Grace, thank you for bringing this in. This is so important. We have Judy, who is saying, thank you for this conversation, the labor of love you are doing for our world as we reconstruct the truth of our siblings and their foreparents. I have this book on my list to buy next. So yeah, there's a lot of people who really are appreciative of your voice and appreciative of this book. As my good friend Mr. Phil Fox says, also share this video, right? If you can share this video and help us
Thank you, Phil.
promote the book, that would be even better. But yeah, so anything you want to say to kind of close out our conversation here, Mariah, and then we'll let Renee have the last word.
Yeah, I think this book is just a good reminder that for those of us who identify as Christian and follow that faith, that this is a necessary part of our faith. And I think too often we try to skip over the process of lament and what really it can be beautiful about going through lament and experiencing that. We try to skip over that and immediately go to the joy and go to, the light at the end of the tunnel. And so I think this is a good reminder that there's beauty within this space as well, and it's necessary to not skip over this important part of our faith.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mariah, for that reminder, Mariah.
Mm-hmm.
Renee, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, just even seeing Lenore here, I know that she probably has some really good lament too. And just thinking of all the, our Indigenous peoples and this, I mean, writing this was probably more of a public lament, and that was probably part of it. But like, I also know that our Indigenous peoples probably have lament, written in songs or just even in our stories and our experiences. And so I think my encouragement is just, or just this gentle ask of like, what is your lament? And the part of, history and the churches and all these people groups or themes telling us who we are and who we aren't. If we can kind of just step away from that and just kind of in the light of who Creator is, like, are we able to just really tell Him what our thoughts are, without fear of, anything. I think my imagination is like, what would our lament look like as Indigenous peoples, and what, how powerful that would be for everyone. So yeah.
Mariah, Renee, thank you for your contribution to this book. For everyone else out there, I encourage you to get it. You can get it on Amazon. I'm sharing the publisher's link where you can get it. I highly, highly, highly recommend this book, Voices of Lament, Reflections on Brokenness and Hope in a World Longing for Justice. 29 women of color contributed to this work, and it is very important. So thank you all for joining us. Again, I'm going to share one more time. If you want to jump on a Q&A, myself, Renee, and Mariah will be on my Patreon site immediately after this. We'll be starting in about 5 or 10 minutes. If you're not a member of my Patreon, you can subscribe. You need to subscribe at the Ask Questions level. And once you're on my Patreon, you'll get access to a Zoom link where you can join, and we'll have about 20 or 30 minutes of Q&A starting in about 5 to 10 minutes. So remember to share this video. If you like the second cup of coffee, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on notifications, and that way you'll find out when I'm brewing my coffee, and you can sit down in time to join the conversation. But Ahiahat, my relatives, thank you so much. Mariah and Renee, Ahiahat, thank you so much. I appreciate your work to walk in beauty, and for your public work to help all of us to learn how to walk in beauty together. So ahiaha and hakona.
Mhm.
Mado for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, I like